So while our actors are finding their place in the audience, I'd like to invite our panelists to come up and take their place up here. We're going to bring some water out. And while our panelists are coming up, I'd just like to say a couple quick things. This is an abridged version of the play. We skip over a whole section, which we can talk about, but there's a lot to talk about already in what's been presented. Before the panelists jump in, I just want to plant the first seed of the first question I'm going to ask you as an audience so you can think about it, and then we're going to come right to you as soon as they're done with their opening remarks. So now that you've seen these four actors going for broke with very little rehearsal, trying to make sense of this ancient Greek play, trying to bring it to life here in this space tonight, and you know the play was from 2,500 years ago and performed in ancient Athens, in spite of the distance of culture and time, in spite of the fact that this was not written with a green space audience in mind, or any modern audience, what touched you? What spoke to you as true to your own experiences? What struck you while listening to the performance tonight? We're going to return to that question in a few seconds. Before we do, I'm going to turn things over to our panelists. And what I forgot to mention, who's ever making the best eye contact gets to go first. So Dominic, you've nominated yourself, and we'll just go from Dominic to George. We'll go across the table. So go right ahead.
Thank you. So my name is Dominic DuPont, and I served 21 years in prison for a violent crime and was just recently released by given clemency by Governor Cuomo. And obviously we'll have an opportunity to talk about some of the things that I think directly correlate with my prison experience and what we just heard a little while ago.
You can go right in.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. So one of the things I think stood out was the conversation about showing a sense of humanity and how that's looked upon when you're serving time in maximum security prisons. And is there a correlation with what we saw happen during the reading and what we currently see happening today in the criminal justice system all across the United States of America? Is there this idea that yes, someone should be held accountable. They should be held responsible. You heard that directly from Prometheus. You heard that conversation that, I made choices and that we should be held responsible. He acknowledged where he went wrong at and that he should be punished. I think one of the things that we should try to look at when we have this conversation is what happens to a person while they're on the inside, and more importantly, what will happen to them as they start to transition on the outside.
Thanks so much for getting us started, Dominic. Alex?
My name is Alex Duran, and I also served time in prison. I did 12 years in a maximum security facility. And several themes resonated with me, but I think that the one that was more salient was resiliency, and how even though he doesn't really go into sort of the series, well, he does goes into a little bit the series of events that led up to him being incarcerated, and the systemic inequities that led to that and the pernicious system that he found himself in. That's what really resonated with me. This endless punishment, perpetual punishment. I served 12 years in prison. I'm currently under correctional supervision. I'm on parole. I can't get a driver's license. I have a curfew. I'm actually violating it because I was supposed to be at home at 7 o'clock. Up to a month ago, I couldn't vote. And it's like, once your sentence stops, you're still being punished. And this idea of perpetual punishment kind of what stood out for me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Pamela Villakundu, and I am a criminal justice reform advocate. I have to say I'm humbled to be a part of this panel. My executive director that works at the organization I work at always says criminal justice or prison survivors, right? Because, as we'll talk about tonight, I think the system really does a great job at tearing people apart and making it nearly impossible for them to come out and thrive. And so I'm really humbled to be next to you guys because you guys are the real experts. So I got my feet wet in criminal justice reform by working on the Closed Rikers campaign a couple years ago, a little over 2 years ago. And I currently work in the South Bronx with youth. I work with young people who go to several schools in the Bronx, middle school and high school students who are incredibly brilliant and who have a lot of potential, but who are at risk just because of the communities that they live in, right? Just because of the zip codes that they didn't have any say that they would be born in, they are at risk of falling into this really pernicious system, as you were saying. And so some of the things that stood out to me was one of the, I forget who the character was, but they said you're an instrument, right, to the correctional officer, so to speak. You are basically a vessel that is orchestrated through some much higher power that we never really get to see, right? When we think about our carceral system, when we think about our prison system, it's so hard to figure out how we got here, right? And I think what's so brilliant about this play is that it's only so powerful because there's been such an accumulation of policies, of biases, but it's all been intentional, and at this point it's all built on top of the other, and we've gotten to this point where what do we tackle? Do we tackle, speedy trial? Do we tackle our super unjust bail reform issues? Do we talk about solitary confinement, right? And so it can be really, really difficult to think about, but I don't think that that's the reason to lose hope, and that's why I will always be a criminal justice reform advocate, and I think there's a better way to do this. And I want to challenge people to think about how we can both hold people accountable while affirming their humanity, because they're not mutually exclusive. And that's what we're forced to think that way, and we need to break out of that. So,
Thank you so much, George.
Good evening, everyone. My name's George. I'm a poet with free verse. I'm glad you brought up solitary confinement. I really am. There's a lot of this that resonates with me. By the way, boogie down in the house for those who know what that means. Okay. He was definitely under solitary confinement, chained to that rock. And a couple of things he said. Number one, you have to look at the history. He was a traitor, and he switched sides for the new administration, kind of like what's going on in America today. Okay. So, and then he was punished for that because how are you, as someone omnipotent, going to trust somebody that flipped the script? That this is some jailhouse vernacular if you don't get it. Flip the script, like flip a pancake, okay? And then he's crying about it. Zeus is omnipotent. He's supposed to be hearing all this is going on while he's crying about it. He says, I'm looking for just compensation. That struck me because in speaking with the justice system today, all these people that all of a sudden it's coming out now, 20 years later, 30 years later, unjust convictions, phony DNA, detectives lying. The guy in Brooklyn that put together, like 20 people away that never did anything, and then society, even though they suffered, gives them a hard time about just compensation. You can never get the time back. Money doesn't buy that. So, this play resonates. I think it resonates with what's going on today, and I'm ready for the questions.
Thank you so much. I'd love to thank these four panelists for getting us started with a big round of applause. This is what our Theater of War is about. Was the project about? Is just starting the conversation. I really appreciate you just jumping in. It's no small thing, given your many experiences and perspectives, just to lay it out. And I want to thank you for that. As I mentioned before, I'm gonna turn my back to you, but not out of disrespect. And you have 4 live mics. I know you'll jump back in whenever you feel so moved. But I want to go out to the audience. I've got a mic over here. I'm a mic runner myself. There's a hand already here. What struck you? What touched you? What spoke to you tonight in this story that spoke to your experiences? Yes, sir.
How you doing? I'm Ryan Bennett. I'm with Fortune.
Use the mic.
I don't really use mic, but I didn't know what this was gonna be about until I got here. The whole thing. When I saw the play, I didn't even know it was gonna be real actors there. But when I saw the play, I paid attention to the play because the part where he said he gave them fire, and when the lady had said it, and he said, "But I helped them create their craft." And it's ridiculous how I heard that, and I'm just like, that's crazy, because I also did tell myself, I just got out. And I tried to start a creative writing group, but they would try everything to not let me do it, because we have a lot to say, no way to say it. And if I felt like if I was to help people get that platform and say what they want to say, then they could feel better. They wouldn't let me do it. They tried everything they power to not let me do it, but I love the play because the way he was so stubborn and feeling like, yo, I was right. No matter how you look at it, I feel the same way sometimes. Like, I know this, like, I know that, but it's just, I met a lot of COs that think like the Zeus and the other guy that was sitting there. I met a lot of COs, like, it's really amazing how you don't know. I did not know until I got there and really saw racism at its best, at its finest, and oppression at its best and at its finest. And they literally do not care if you get shot, get stabbed, get cut. It don't matter. They just gonna fill the seat with another body. And that's the attitude that swims around the whole place. And it's, yo, it's crazy. It's crazy. It really is. It's crazy. It's a perfect example of what it's like. Right. That whole play was a perfect example of what it's like.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Karantina. I also am with the Fortune Society, and the thing that stuck out to me the most in the play is Prometheus's stubbornness, because I too just came home. I just came home in November, and I had a friend on the inside, and her name was Asia, and she was young. I believe at the time she was 20, about to be 21. Very young, very hot-headed, and we used to tell her all the time, like, humble yourself, calm down, and she did not care what nobody had to say. Every day she was turning up. Every day was a turn up. She was not with nothing, disrespecting officers, going in, like, so Prometheus really reminded me of her, just the stubbornness, like, I don't care. I'm going to do and say how I feel, and I don't care about the situation I'm in. I'm here, and we going to get it shaken. And that's the attitude that she had, and I felt like that's the attitude that he portrayed.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. If I could really quick, I want to speak to, first of all, I want to thank both of you guys for the comments. Shout out to Fortune, Open Society, all the other grassroots organizations that are in this room doing the work, Department of Probation. We're not anti-law enforcement. What you want to do? You need the mic too, bro? All right. Could you please make sure that he gets a chance to do that, to speak, because I think that that's important. But what I want to say is that I feel like it's all of our responsibilities in the room to work really hard to break the cycle. We are not anti-law enforcement. We are not anti-criminal justice. We believe that people should be held accountable for when they make wrong decisions. But how we deal with people once they are on the inside, and we know that the statistics show, the numbers don't lie, that 96% of the people who are incarcerated across the nation will be released someday. We spend $80 billion, with a B, $80 billion nationwide to incarcerate people. How much of that funding is going to treatment? How much of that funding is going to programs? One of the things that I've often believed, that good programming is good security in the prison, and as people start to transcend from prison into the community. We better start asking ourselves some really tough questions. Where are our tax dollars going? And these people who will be reintegrating back into the community, how are they best prepared to be citizens who pay taxes now, vote, and do all the other important things that happen when a person returns back to the community?
Thank you so much, Dominic. Yes, sir, please.
Yes, my name is Stanley. First off, I want to commend the actors for channeling their characters and really bringing to the table the quality of the characters that they try to portray. Second, I'm here with Fortune Society, and often I've also been incarcerated as a youth, and a lot of times we tend to, like Prometheus himself, we tend to justify our means by a greater cause or a greater good, not knowing that the damage that we're doing is also inflicting some type of harm upon society. So I think it's like you said. Also, we have to really figure out what is what. who sometimes we are a product of our society and our environment, and we have the heart of a prize fighter, but we're fighting for the wrong things. You know, like me myself in particular, you know, I was selling drugs to take care of my 3 kids, but at the same time, I'm hurting so many more people that I'm helping.
That's right.
You know, so I have to start asking myself, well, what do I really want to do? What is my purpose? What is my cause? So I think us, you know, just working together, but also searching within to find out who we really and truly are would allow us to find our right purpose. You know, there's a lot of distractions out here. There's just so many distractions, music, this, that, and the third. You know, but if you really truly pay attention to stuff, I feel like we could all find where we're supposed to be here in this plane. Thank you.
I'm glad you brought that. I'm glad you brought that up about owning it, because Prometheus doesn't own it. I mean, he broke a rule. He justifies it by saying, "I gave it to man." It's not just the fire, because he gave them consciousness too, what to do with the fire, for crafts, and like I think a part of, if you're in the system, is to own it. Which I mean. If you pled guilty, then you got to eat that. If you were found guilty, you got to eat it too. But Prometheus, you know, he don't even got the death penalty because he gets brought back to life every day. Yeah. So it's kind of rough for him. But he's not owning his behavior at all.
I don't know.
One second. One part to, I think, getting past those things in life that caused us to get in trouble or whatever is owning your own behavior.
Well, thank you. I just want to add this really quickly. There's somewhere, I don't know if I necessarily agree with every aspect of that, because there's a point where he says, you know, I've hurt men, I've made my choices. And I'm not sure if that goes to the extent of what you're saying, like as far as, you know, maybe acknowledging, you know, or maybe doing a little bit more than that. But I believe there was some aspect of the conversation where he said, you know, I've hurt men, I've made my choices. And then he kind of moved on and said, you know, pain tends to wander, and I think maybe that was some sort of connection with that. But
thank you both. I really appreciate that. You know, I'll just say really quickly, we'll come right over because I know you've been waiting a long time, sir. We've had a lot of people who've been incarcerated talk about how, after our performances and these discussions, about how for them part of the process of healing and reintegrating, and also finding constructive and positive narrative for themselves, is owning what happened, regardless of whether it was just. Owning that it happened and they played a part in it, and not denying how it happened. The flip side is we've done this for corrections workers and corrections officers. When I asked the question, who's Zeus? The first time we did this, what came back was Zeus's Rockefeller drug laws. Zeus's mandatory minimum sentencing. Zeus is the fact that if you get 2 or 3 DUIs, Brian, you're going to have a really slick lawyer and you'll be fine. If I got them, I'd be inside. And I'm already doing 8 hours a day. And so on the flip side, we've also heard from those who work inside the system that the play evokes in them to acknowledge the inequities, the systemic oppression, the injustice of the system in which they work. And there are very few places where those who work within the system feel comfortable sharing their moral distress in working in a system they can't necessarily control, but in which they feel that kind of level of discomfort. So you've been waiting a really long time.
Yes, my name is Elijah. I just got employed to PAM, Bronx Connect. I'm gonna speak on just like, not just imprisonment because just life itself. Like, I just came home tour for doing 3 years. I did 1.5 years in the box. But even before my bid, I was imprisoned out here. And what touched me about the story was just the lack of the people he was around, of them listening to him. Because you could walk around and, you know, you could feel how you feel, but it's also good to express yourself and get off your mind. Because like he said, if he sit there and don't get it off his mind, he might go crazy. But he did take consideration of what he did. But with him, you know, it was just too much going on at that moment. And he had to just slow it down, like his friend said. He couldn't think straight. He couldn't move straight because at the same time, he was still letting himself be in prison, his mind. He couldn't free his mind. And you know, like, as being like in solitary, where you can't move, you can't do what you want to do, you can't move how you want to move, it shifts the mind to a negative place. You will never be positive. You will never move forward because all you're thinking about is the negative in the situation you in. So when you got restraints on you, it's not impossible to move forward, but you need a hand with you. You can't have a person like the friend that's with you telling you I'ma go. Nah, fight this with me. Hear what I gotta say. Don't sit there and take lack of what I'm saying. Look at me. You understand what I'm saying? Just look at me. Like I got 2 rods in my arms. I got a rod in my rib, my feet. How you expect me to feel right now? For trying to help humanity, and y'all supposed to be gods. And one part struck me, like, cause the woman was like, the people down there are so weak. That's cause you allowed them to be weak. Y'all got everything up here. But what else can I do but be weak?
Thank you so much. She's been waiting for a little bit over here. I'm going to come over here and just say, I really appreciate everything you said. The one thing that I wanted to bring out that I was touched by, because we were in Rikers 3 weeks ago, was a lot of the folks in the male housing unit where we performed talked about that it's possible to be imprisoned outside of incarceration. And you brought that theme into the room in a really powerful way.
When I was out there, before my bid, it's not like I'm not blaming my attitude, like, you couldn't tell me nothing, but my mom always told me I just think I could beat the world. And that's what made it dangerous, because I wasn't taking consideration of what people was telling me. I was just, you can't tell me anything. I wasn't one out the under. It wasn't, I sit down and tell you, yeah, whatever, and think about it. So when you so stuck in your ways, it makes it bad for you, because at the end of the day, you gotta listen to somebody. You have to take consideration of something. You can't live life without taking consideration or thinking about others, because then you're just gonna be a lost cause. Like, you're not looking for help.
Thank you so much. Prometheus says, I think you were alluding to it. He says, you shouldn't ask me to listen to you. You can't ask a raging spirit to rest.
You can't.
And I think you're speaking to that so beautifully right now. Ma'am, you've been waiting a very long time.
Thank you so much. My name is Roselle. I am a partner with Neon Harlem Group. I'm an advocate working to get formerly and actually current incarcerated folks to vote. And thank you to Executive 181. What I wanted to say, some of you guys have already hit on it, but what was striking to me was that we have these gods, namely Zeus and his council, and although they're gods, they don't all agree. They don't all believe that what Zeus is doing is the right thing, to put it plainly. And these folks that are coming to visit Prometheus, they're the folks like me. They're the folks that want to see Prometheus get out of his situation, to flourish from his situation. And I just think it's important for folks who are the Prometheus in our society, the Prometheuses in our society, to know that, just despite the rage and the rant, we're always going to be there, and we're always going to be, doing that advocacy, because we do our best to understand where you are. I've never been incarcerated. I've never been on probation. Actually had one case in college that was expunged because I wasn't 21 at the time, so I got lucky. But that discourse was very important between the folks that visited him, and what they were saying about, we can help you, we can speak to Zeus, we can be on your behalf. I thought those were very strong themes in the play. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for you do. Just speaking of that for a moment, you guys want to talk, but you bring up a really good point, which is the chorus that are the relatives, the Oceanids, these women. And if the play was staged in the way that some scholars think, they were flown in on cranes, and they kind of like De La Guarda, they sort of flew over the audience. And these women, these Oceanids, at first they come with great sympathy, and then they hear what he did, and they start to judge him. And then they start to really argue with him. But at the end of the day, in spite of everything he does and says, when Hermes says, you better run, they say, we'll accept his punishment with him. We'll stand with him. and accept this punishment and be buried in rock with him. And I feel like what you're saying is that we may not always say the right thing, we may not always sound like we're free of judgment, but being present and standing with people, no matter what they say, if they're raging, and hearing them and seeing them, no matter what they say, is clearly a critical job. Yeah.
That too, but it brings back, not for Prometheus because he's a god, but it brings back that humanity, right, of it all, because he is in a sense of shock. He is out of himself, and that is really bringing him back and reeling him into who he is as a god.
Thank you so much. I know you guys, Alex, you were going to speak in.
Alex first, and then Brian,
over
if
here?
you
Okay.
just get the hand for me, please.
Yeah, I just had
Thank you,
some
Marshall.
reactions to the people from Fortune who spoke. Thank you so much for being here, speaking up. I would just highlight like this idea of systemic oppression and individual agency. I'm personally big on individual agency. I think we should take responsibility for what we did, but also what led us to make those decisions. A person that would the raised in a affluent neighborhoods probably would have not made those decisions. So we got to think about sort of the path that was laid for us, right? We as a country incarcerate more people than any country in the world. There's 2.2 million people incarcerated in this country. We have a quarter of the population of China, and we have 500,000 people more incarcerated than they do. So we kind of, we're sometimes too conservative on saying, yeah, it was me who did it. It was I should take full responsibility. But also, if you think about what led us to that path, sometimes we didn't have no choice. It's the only choice that was in front of us. So thank you.
Thanks. If I could really quickly, I just want to add to this point. I think this is less about race and more about class. I know that there are plenty of people who are of some financial status, and I just think that that's important to add to the conversation. I mean, George is up here; he spent time in prison. I mean, so I want to make sure that we understand that this, to me, is just bigger than a race.
It's
thing.
always been about the economic class in this country.
Absolutely. So
the lower echelon immigrants and people on the lower economic class in this country, going back to Pennsylvania system, which is where we get the penitentiary from, because it was supposed to be to do a penance. Always the lower economic people that couldn't afford their own lawyers or bail. The bail system is corrupt, and it shouldn't be. It's not constitutional in my view. Okay, Harvey Weinstein, $1 million is nothing to him, but that kid who's struggling to pay $400 rent gets a $5,000 bail in the Bronx for breaking a window or something. That's like a half a year's pay to him. He can't come up with $5,000.
Yeah, thank you.
Harvey Weinstein, to be in that thing, he should have paid like $200 million to bail out.
So
I mean, really.
So I think that's an important piece, and
it's never been about
and the
race,
second
you're
thing,
right.
Absolutely. So, and the second thing, because I know we want to definitely get to the audience, I really enjoyed the conversation with Prometheus and the conversation that was sparked about intelligence. And you think intelligence is more powerful than force. Yeah. And there was a connection there for me, because there are a lot of people who work in these type of systems, and I just think that the idea that the fact that they have the system behind them, and maybe the lack of maybe more supervision causes situations to come about that But I also agree with what you were saying. The culture of if you are that person who works in the system and shows some humanity, you're weak, you're soft. You get up off your knees and all of this other type of stuff are things that I also think that we should think about. But you've been very patient, so we're coming your way right now.
Thank you. Yeah.
I actually have a question for.
Got to turn it on.
It's on. Just
all right, for Alex and Dominic, I have a specific question.
Sure.
So before you were asked to join this panel tonight, had you heard of this play? And when you learned about it, and you also learned that it was over 2,000 years old, how did it make you, or did it make you reflect upon your own experience as part of a 2,000-year-old project?
That's a great question. Thank you. So no, I had heard nothing about the theater of war at all. I served 20 years, 7 months, 18 days in maximum security prison.
Not that you were counting.
Yeah. Oh no, I was definitely counting. I was counting down to the second.
I hear you, bro.
And I've been in the community for 142 days. So think about that process, right? And the entire world is different to me. I mean, I questioned whether I was like in New York or on Mars when I was released from prison. And I'm literally like working to process how different New York looks and how things have changed. So yeah, I was really honored to be part of this. I had not heard about the theater war, but the moment I heard about it and had the opportunity to go to Rikers Island and be involved with what was going on, I was like, look, Brian, we need to have a conversation. Like, this is amazing to me that the cycle continues. It's really hard for me to process that things that were happening that long ago are continuing, and it's so blatant. It's like we don't see what's going on, like as if we, I'm afraid to say that we don't care. I would hope that's not the direction that this country is going in, but I'm seriously concerned that we would put as much money into this system as opposed to looking at avenues where we can put young people through college, education, or that we can deal with the issues of poverty, or that we can deal with some of the challenges that young people are facing that would have them feel like they're hopeless and that this is their only option. I am deeply, deeply concerned about the direction that we're going. And what I would say to the people that's listening, that's in this room, that's paying attention, is you need to get on board. We need to say to ourselves, is this okay? And if it is, then I'm concerned if you can look yourself in the mirror.
Thanks. Alex, yeah.
So I actually read Prometheus before. I took Greek tragedy in college, and I also had the pleasure to have Brian come into Eastern Correctional Facility while I was there to give a lecture. I was a student of the Bard College Prison Initiative program, and Brian, he actually put in Oedipus
Rex. He performed.
He performed inside of Eastern. Reflections. I think that most of us, if we were to say, if we were living in the 1850s, we probably would have done something different to end slavery. And if we were living in the 1950s, we'll say we would do something different to end Jim Crow. But we're living in the age of mass incarceration, in the most incarcerated country in the world. And I mean, you have the power to vote. I think that even though, and I'm talking in New York specifically, Governor Cuomo has praised sort of like a centrist position where he hasn't really done much for criminal justice reform, although he gave you a clemency. I was
going to
good
say,
for that.
Thank you, Governor Cuomo.
Yeah, I am more critical of him. I think that, like truthfully, I go to see my parole officer, and I'm talking about the Yankees, so that's where your tax dollars is wasting. He tells me every time it's a waste of time for you to be here. There's a lot of people like me who are hardworking, are building families, and shouldn't be on parole. I've never had a misbehavior report in 12 years in prison. I'm still, I can't leave the 5 boroughs. I will get violated for that. So that's ridiculous. In our system, like you said, $80 billion is being spent in really, and it's not producing public safety. If and this is something that's key, and it was key in the play, that this system is built purely on a punitive paradigm. It's not about public safety. If you ask crime survivors what they want, they wouldn't say low incarcerations.
That's a great segue to a second question. I know there have been a couple hands up in the air and people who want to talk, but I do want to just perturb the conversation and move it in another direction and then one more direction before we get to the cookies, so we don't stay in the same just sort of pattern. Although this pattern we could talk about for hours, and I know I could listen to you guys talk, all of you on the panel, for hours. But that segue, this was going to be really early on, but I've been so fascinated with everyone said. this question of what is the system for is in the first scene of the play. And they didn't have a mass incarceration system in ancient Greece. Worse than incarceration was to be exiled. But in a certain way, being confined via parole or being sent off to a maximum security prison somewhere far away from your family is a type of exile as well, when you're limited in that way. Anyway, in this first scene, there are two guards or gods, you want to call them, Kratos and Bia, power and force. And Kratos is pretty unsympathetic and pretty brutal. And then there's Hephaestus, who has been ordered to do this thing. He says, the weight of this work hangs upon my shoulders, it bears down upon me, I hate my hands for what they have to do. And we're bound by blood, we're human beings, we're brethren, I can't do this to another human being. And as we've been doing it in correctional settings for staff, the conversation we've been trying to engender is a question of, what is it for? What do you really, because it clearly within our country, there is vast disagreement. Even within this room, I'm sure there's vast disagreement, but within a system, even for those who are working within that system, there's vastly different perspectives. Are we here to punish? Are we here to rehabilitate and heal and reintegrate? And those aren't just the only binaries. There are other possibilities. But I wondered if folks could speak to that first scene that, and I know your hands, so I'm sure you're going to integrate what you were going to say into my question now.
So about 20 years ago, I was a theater student in college in Connecticut, and we performed a piece in a maximum security prison. And what was really compelling to me, it was all men, was that I thought, oh, this guy could be my brother. Like, this guy could be my next door neighbor. And I had a lot of empathy. And I think that what's missing currently is that, and in the prison system, I don't think people who are working in the prison system can actually see themselves in the people who are incarcerated. And I think that it should be, our goal should be to rehabilitate and to heal, and so that, our brothers and sisters can go back into the community and not go back. Because if you're not giving someone the tools to heal, then how do you expect them to change their lives? It just makes no sense to me. We spend all this money incarcerating people, but not helping them, not educating them, not helping them with mental health issues or addictions, and I think things need to change.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking on. Maybe someone else wants to jump in. This first scene, I know, your hands are over here. Yeah, someone up there speaking. Oh, yeah, we'll go over here because go ahead. You haven't spoken, sir, please.
Hi, so my name is Napoleon. I'm also with Freeverse. So I just wanted to chime in on what the sister said over there, and also what your question, what is the system for? And I just think to myself is, like, when I was listening to the play and I was sitting here, and I think about it all the time, just going through the system myself, I wonder, you got to think back, who are the ones holding all the cards? Like, who are the ones holding all the power? Who has the money? I feel like the money is speaking for a lot of the policies that they're passing here in this world in the United States. And, just as she was saying, we should promote peace, we should promote healing. I think to myself, well, that's not what's profiting. That's not what's making the money. And I don't want to sound crazy, but in my head, I think to myself, I think that's what it is. It's about the profit margin. It's about the money. We put people out on the street. Everybody lives their lives. It's all about when someone just makes, that wrong turn, or when someone decides to make that wrong choice, and and they go down the wrong alley, or they decided to just act in the wrong way. That's just another dollar in someone else's pocket to a system that they're perpetuating. It almost sounds like the fire was given to us a long time ago. It's like they're working extra hard to take that fire from us. And we have that fire currently, and it's called, awakening and gaining consciousness, and, being woke, as the young people say today, and that's what it is. That fire is that woke. We gotta let our people know. We gotta educate the young people. We gotta get proactive and get into the communities and really dive our hands in there and use that flame to just fling it at the suckers at the top, just like to let them know that we don't appreciate the policy, and that this world is for us, not just for the chosen few, not just for the 1%, as they said, or whatever. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Wow, thank you so much.
Brian.
Thank you, Napoleon. Yeah. I just want to say, I was listening to you talking. We do a lot of work with the military. We do a lot of work with the police. We do a lot of work with corrections officers. We do work with inmate populations, with formerly incarcerated. But listening to you talk, I was thinking about, and I'm not sure why it must be, but it seems that overwhelming force is an engine of our capitalist system. That it's a reason why our GDP goes to producing overwhelming force in almost every sector of our society. I wonder why it is that we can't commercialize a consciousness.
It's like
Yeah.
engineers for war.
Yeah.
It's like our history is embedded in emotions.
Absolutely.
You asked if it was punishment, right?
Is it
well, in 1971, when the Attica riot came, the sign over the prison said Attica State Prison. After the riot, for semantics, they changed the sign to Attica Correctional Facility. Now, you want to know something? Any prison I've ever been with that said correctional facility, I never felt much corrected after I did my time. I don't know why. They didn't do a good job, maybe it's semantics, euphemism, but I never felt corrected because they said I was in a correctional facility.
I'm going to come back to you guys because you've spoken before. I'm going to come right here, and I promise we'll come back. But
So coming back to your question of the characters that were sort of like the COs in it, and so I'm Sharon, I'm a physician, and I worked on a project of preventing overdose among people coming out of prison, and what was really interesting about that, the COs and the prisoners saw eye to eye on the need to prevent overdose. Now, it didn't change the system, but for the first time ever, COs actually wanted to teach prisoners the technique. And I sort of see Prometheus as both a hero and a traitor. And it was sort of like for a while they were focusing on the hero part. And you know, I seeing that little barrier go down for a little while, and I'm not that familiar with the prison system, was amazing to all the people I talked to. And how can we bridge that humanity between them in other ways? Because they're from the same worlds in so many ways. I mean, not everybody, but so many.
Yeah. You know, one of the first times we did Prometheus for corrections officers, I said, well, who's Prometheus? Have you ever met Prometheus? One of the COs in rural Missouri said, well, I'm Prometheus. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, I'm the one who's chained here to this rock at the end of the earth. And from his perspective, in the minds of our society, more criminal than the people that I'm supposed to be guarding. Now, certainly there are, people who work within the system who are like Kratos and Bia. I imagine you've also met people who are like Hephaestus.
Absolutely. And if I could really quickly, I want to make sure that we understand that when I look at people, I'm not concerned what color uniform they're wearing on, what they're wearing. A lot of us are wearing green uniforms. There are over 20,000 correctional officers, uniformed officers in New York State, charged with the responsibility of making sure that counts are done correctly and all the other important things. Matter of fact, I will speak to this point. As I served almost 21 years in prison, I've met a lot of good correction officers and a lot of good civilians that work in the system. And I'm not concerned about the status quo, there's this concept in prison, this us against them. My way of surviving in prison was allowing prison to be a place of redemption and not being concerned about what people think about me, but being concerned about the right thing. And to me, if you were doing the right thing, it didn't matter whether you were wearing blue or green, I stood with you. And I've also seen correction officers save a lot of lives, run to situations where guys were being attacked and being hurt and staff were at risk of being hurt and all of that. So I understand that, and I'm not afraid to communicate that. I just really think it's important that if we have this conversation that we understand that we should all have a seat at the table. And as long as the purpose for you being at that table is that we address things in a very humane manner, then we can come to some common goal where we can save lives in prison, and people can start to heal in prison. The concept, I believe it, that hurt people hurt, I believe that. And it doesn't matter to me, whether you have a blue uniform or not. I see some of the highest rates of suicide are in the area of law enforcement. So, let's, I think we're all connected in one way. This cycle is no one is going to be able to shed this. And I think we have to be aware of that. And we can't be afraid to say that. We can't be afraid to understand that if we're going to really address this problem, that we all have to have this common thing in the center of it, and it's called humanity.
I just want to say something really quickly just to add to that. That correction officers are not the marginalized class, right? In a system that disproportionately affects people of color. However, there is a dialectical dehumanization that is occurring in the prison system between the people who are incarcerated and the people who oversee the system. And there are a lot of people who work in that system that are also being dehumanized. And we never really talk about those people because they're not the marginalized class and the people who are the sort of the victims of the most oppression. But I saw in the play when officers, it came to mind, the person who was hammering down Prometheus. That's like a correction officer starting off new in the job. Like not wanting to do that, but having to do that and then 6 months later, they completely lost their humanity.
Thank you so much. Yeah, please.
I'll add one more thing as well. What your initial question, right? What is it for? I think I've heard a lot of really compelling ideas, and I think that for me, class is obviously important, but I think race, you can't talk about this, without talking, and you brought this up, the disproportionate impact that the carceral system has had on people of color. And the way that COs just become pawns, right? When I was doing organizing work to close Rikers, I spoke to tons of COs. I spoke to a CO who was a black woman who, worked at Rikers for 20 plus years, and she had horror in her eyes telling me the stories of what she had to go through and what she did to other people and what she witnessed getting done to other people. And so, and I don't mean to say that it's a really, really tricky subject. This is just, her testimony. But for me, it's really tough because, like you said, it's a tiered system, right? And so the detained folks, the prisoners, are still going to suffer the most. But I don't know if a hierarchy of oppression is valid when you're thinking about, I think you can get distracted, right, about thinking, well, who's this and who's that? The real problem, you go back to the class thing, and it is about the 1%. It is about private prisons gaining traction in our country, and you just have to make sure you're keeping that on target and not getting lost with all of these other things.
So one of the reasons we started doing performances, because we couldn't get access to the inmate population, so it was sort of a happy accident. When we got access to the staff and to the COs, it was because, we believed that theater could be a tool for engaging them in a conversation about the ethical choices they were making every day on the ground. And one of the things we've learned about police and those who are working in law enforcement as well as military is that if we're not addressing their mental health and we're not addressing the trauma and the ethical and moral load of what they're doing within the system, then we're not going to be able to stop the kind of things that have happened that have been egregious and may be egregious on a daily basis. If we criminalize and marginalize them, then they are Prometheus chained to the rock at the end of the earth. But I appreciate everything that's been said about not conflating that with talking about them as a marginalized class in the way that we might talk about socioeconomic issues or racial oppression. We did a performance early on with a woman, Elizabeth Marvel, who recently did a performance here for Theater of Law, playing Promethea. We changed the gender, and we performed in a female prison of Vandalia. At the end of the discussion, a female CO raised her hand. She said to Beth, who's a Quaker and never been in a prison in her life, the Quakers have a long tradition of going into prisons and standing with people and being with people. She said to her, I want to ask the actress a question. So go ahead. I want to know how you knew what it sounds like when women are dragged to the hole. And Beth sort of slid down in her chair, and she said, I have no idea. And I said, why do you ask that? I usually don't ask follow-up questions, but I asked the corrections officer, and she said, in my experience, women always go screaming and men go quietly. Now, whether that's a sort of actual statement about gender that's of any value at all, I don't know. But it seems to me it describes someone who's been, in some ways, sort of dehumanized by the system of hearing that scream over and over again, and continuing, like Hephaestus, as you say, to have to play out these orders that are being given from above, and feels a sort of moral discomfort in hearing that scream and having to be brought back into the room. Yeah. You've been waiting for a long time in the back, and then I know there was a hand here, and then I'm going to ask one final question before we get to our reception. Yes, ma'am.
This was just on your question. Yeah. What is it all for? The judicial system in itself is in existence, and it's run in the name of society. Everyone who is arrested, everyone who is incarcerated, these actions are done in the name of society. Who is society? People. We all are society. So that means if it's done in our name, it is our responsibility to see that it is done correctly, judiciously, how it's supposed to be done, because they're doing this on our behalf. And I can't say it enough, and I agree with the brother wholeheartedly. We need to get involved. Awareness is everything. Education is everything. I didn't realize the ignorance that people have around the justice system. Everybody just expects that, oh, it's the police, they're doing the right thing. It's the judge, it's the DA, they're doing the right. No, they're not. They're not always doing the right thing. And it's on us to put the pressure on them to do the right thing. Otherwise, they're just going to run rampant. So that's...
Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the question. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Before I say what I had to say, just piggyback off of what she said. They actually tell society that we're locking these criminals up for you guys, for the people that don't go to jail, for the people that go to work every day and do all that. And then if you're one of those people and you have a relative that's in jail, think about it. Like when he said, listen to me, and he said, brother over there said, listen to me, that's one of the most powerful things I ever heard, and that's so true. Because you can look at somebody and watch their lips move all you want and not hear a word you say, because you don't relate to none of that. And you will never relate to it unless you have an open mind for suggestion. But when Prometheus said, tell Zeus to throw the thunder down and all that,
give it to me,
and give me anything you got because I can't die and everything, that spoke more volumes to me than anything else in the play, simply because I actually had to step up and do that, because before I got locked up, I had nothing to do with myself. Every single day, there was nothing on my plans whatsoever. I had nothing. I lived 13 years of idle life, idle time, doing absolutely nothing. And when I got in there, I realized that there was so much power up here. So the force and the power people that you saying their names mean force and power, that means nothing to the physical, because physically I could be strong, but my mind is so much stronger. I look at the crippled genius, Stephen Hawking, I think that's his name. Yes. The one that can't move, look what he's doing. He can't move. He has no force, he has no power on the physical, but his mind is pushing him there. And I think that's where a lot of people fall off. It's not about getting jobs and about keeping your family safe. It's about building up the mentality of the little kids, not just us. We here, but mind you, I could say, oh, I'm a black person or you're a white person or all of that, but at the same time, the common denominator is person. We are all people. We all here. We all humans. The little kids are the only ones that can help us out of this. If we build them up, it's not gonna happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But you can't tell a 30-year-old man what he's been doing for 30 years is wrong. You're not gonna try to hear none of that. But you tell a little child, listen, this is how you, I'm saying, help coach them through that. That's more, I feel like that'll be more effective. Because if you tell them it's a tree is a tree, they're gonna believe for the rest of their life a tree is a tree. If you tell them how to be right, and not really enslave their mind and none of that, but show them the right way to move, then they will find that.
So investing $80 billion in early child development.
There we go. Breaking the cycle. Speaking of breaking the cycle, Brian. Yep.
I'm going to shift gears to my last question. If you had a thought, you can just fold it in, because we want to get to the cookies. And I just want to say, here, you know I do. You know I do. So here's a question I've asked many audiences in many different settings. I'd love to hear what people think if there are a few people in the audience. So here's this thing. We did this at Gitmo, and we arrived at Gitmo the second time we went. We convinced them to do Prometheus, and that was no small feat. We were told by the admiral when we arrived that the last inmate who had killed himself, and there have been many who'd committed suicide at Gitmo under the watch of multiple admirals, had done it by fashioning a noose out of candy wrappers. And when detainees, some of them had arrived, they had sent letters to the admiral saying things like, the only way I'm going to leave this island is on a gurney, dead. So watching people who have been stripped of their power weaponize their own bodies as a way of controlling the situation they're in, going on hunger strikes, in rightful indignation for a system, for something they feel is wrong, has violated their basic human rights, was something we witnessed when we performed the play. And we were performing, and I won't go into all the details, but we were performing for a very diverse group of people who worked there. And at the end, this is the question I ask, which is, Prometheus does this amazing thing. He calls out to Zeus and he says, I know how you're going to fall, but I'm not going to tell you. And it's a woman, by the way, and I'm not going to tell you anything. Mm-hmm. And he knows that'll bring Hermes, the assistant warden, to come down. And then Hermes comes and he calls him calling you a child would be insulting to the intelligence of children, right? And then Hermes says, can you just finally show some humility? And his friends, the Oceans, they try to say, you just counsel him. He's like, put your head down, please. And he says, no, as was mentioned by several people, no, let the lightning flash, let the thunder rumble. There's nothing wrong with two enemies attacking each other with everything in their arsenals. But all Prometheus has in his arsenal
is immortality.
Is his immortality, but his capacity to suffer and for his story to get out. So the question is, at the end of the play, we didn't tell this part of the story, but it's widely thought that Zeus attacks the cliff with lightning, the cliff crumbles, and Prometheus is buried in rock and silenced. And then eventually, as was said by Hermes, as we know in the myth, if you've read the Dolaires, I now go to my 7-year-old daughter who knows more Greek mythology than I do when I have this, but ask her, what happens to Prometheus? Well, the rocks are lifted, and eventually that thing happens where there's an eagle that comes every day and eats his liver, and every day his liver regenerates, and his punishment is to have the liver eaten again, and every night he's frozen, and every day he's scorched. And that's his existence after he's been buried in rock. And this is the first of several plays in a series, as I'm sure everyone knows, that ultimately he's released by Hercules. And so the question is simply, at the end of this story, at the end of this play, when Prometheus provokes Zeus to cover him and bury him in rock, who wins? And why?
Because he's not up out in the open where he said, remember the part where he says, I'd rather be in Tartarus, where my enemies cannot see me suffer?
Yes.
So he wins.
Yeah, because they now can see him, or they know the story of his suffering.
We still don't know how he's going to fall.
And Zeus still doesn't have the information.
No, I think it's a tie.
Yeah. Sir, yeah.
Yeah, like he said, it's a tie. Because
Zeus got where he want, Prometheus got where he want.
Because I'm gonna take it like this, you was provoking him because he moved you. I have a slogan, is what moves you conquers you. Mm-hmm. So Zeus moved him. I want to move you now. I know the truth of what's going on with you. So, I took that as, boom, because I was in the cell next to somebody who actually hung himself. And he kept telling the officer, yo, listen, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. F you, I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You're provoking him. There's a tie between the two because both of them, the two feel like they're lost. There's no understanding no more. Like you see your enemies, I don't even want to see you. I don't want to understand you. There's nothing to understand. Nobody wins. Y'all both lose. Because y'all both delight to move yourself. Y'all both rely to get mad at each other. Y'all both rely each other to do something to each other mentally. Not physically, but mentally y'all hurt each other. That's just that.
Thank you. So Prometheus wins. In this scenario, in this interpretation, they both lose, and it's a tie in the sense that they've both been sort of dehumanized, or there's not a right word for gods being dehumanized, but they've lost any sense. They've lost all sense of decency, and they don't see each other, and they don't want to hear each other, and they're both buried in rock to a certain extent.
I feel like it's all like the brother said. It's more not necessarily a tie, but I don't feel like it'd be in a tie if we both losing. You know, so it's almost like perpetuating the cycle. It's you keep throwing doodle on top of doodle, and now you just got a big pile of, you know, like, to the better term, shit. So I don't feel like, you know, I agree, but I just feel like, you know, just losing and losing and losing just perpetuates the cycle. It's like me doing something bad, and then my kids seeing me do something bad, and then they grow up to do exactly what I was once doing. It's cyclical. It's repeating itself, you know, and until it gets better, it's just gonna get that much worse, you know.
Thank you so much. You know, when I asked this question down in Gitmo, the JAG lawyer stood up, and before I'd even finished asking it, he said, "Thank you so much for asking that, Brian. We have lost all moral authority, and we'll never regain it until we give our detainees due process and fair trial."
Wow.
Now, that was said in a room with all kinds of other people, CIA, FBI, Marines who guard the border, who had radically different positions from him. Of course, the actor playing Prometheus, Brian O'Byrne, the Tony Award-winning Irish actor, he and I went out into a back alley. I'm sure we were on like 50 different cameras at that moment, but slapping each other five in every way that we possibly could. But at the end of the day, no one was punished because we were just talking about a play. We're just talking about a play, and when I ask a question like who wins, obviously that's a sort of a unfair question. But there's no one who's been inside a system so forcefully stacked against the people on the receiving end of it who would be in any way a stranger to this idea of Prometheus winning by provoking a punishment so immoral by his captor, like isolation, that it proves his moral superiority to the person who's incarcerated him, whether that's a detainee or that's someone in our incarceration, our system now. So I asked that question for that reason. Now, out of respect for you as an audience, because we're near the end of our time, perhaps someone had something burning within them to say that wasn't addressed by one of my extremely leading questions. Perhaps someone who hasn't spoken before, but, is there a hand over here? Mm-hmm. Yeah, sir, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I've listened to you say that you've done this play at different prisons, colleges. It's obvious where you need to take the play to. And that's to Washington, to the politicians. Because like I said, once you question their power, as the brother said, the guy over there, you know, they don't want to relinquish their power. And just like Prometheus with the fire, we can't allow them to become better than what they are. We got to keep in this submissive state. If we're able to control them, then we're gonna always have this power. The 1%. So it's obvious where this play needs to go so you can get their view, even though they're going to tell you a lie that, oh yeah, we understand what you're saying. Oh sure, yeah, we're going to change the policy. Yeah. They're going to give you the lip service because, like you say, you know, you read about Unicor, the prison industrial complex is cheap labor. So many people profiting. It's on the stock market. I mean, when you think about the people who benefiting from it, why should I relinquish my power? It's about money. So take it to Washington, tell Donald Trump, because it's obvious now, like, oh, Kim Jong-un, you know, he's this great person now. A few months ago, you know, you called him a little rocket man. So, you know, you're all over the place, but...
so there's a possibility we could get in, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Exactly.
Totally.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Anything's possible right now. I totally agree.
I always thought that, and I've spent some time in solitary, that I won because they couldn't break me. I wouldn't tell on my compatriots, and whatever. All you could do was kill me at that point.
And it's good that he said that. I'm sorry to cut you off because you think about the brother in the plaid shirt. He was talking about the power of vote, the power of voting. I mean, these politicians, just like Prometheus, if you're not going to go along with the program, these politicians, then we'll get somebody to replace you that is going to go along with the program. So, does voting change anything? I mean, you got to look at it, because when you think about this play over 2,000 years ago, and it's still going on today, and you just like, at what point do we become better as people?
Right? When do we
So
get
is
that
it going to be
fire?
another 2,000 years that it's going to be another theater war, and people are going to be saying 4,000 years ago they had this play?
At the green space.
Exactly.
Green space.
I feel like it's no matter how many people you bring to the table, whether it's the politicians, the police, and the politicians, they're not going to, I mean, these people in power, Trump, they would rather burn the house down than people to grow as people.
Yeah.
To become better as people. And like I said, but the guy, he gave the best thing. Like, if we can cultivate the young minds and allow them to see a better way, then we have a chance. But like I said, somebody's been doing something for 30 and 40 years. They set in their ways. They're not going to change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I know there's a couple people on the panel might like to have a last word or two. Yeah.
So, related to what he was just talking about, I think we have to start demanding that politicians don't just say we need to do something about criminal justice reform. I'm going to do something about criminal justice reform. We have to ask, well, what are you going to do? And is that enough? Because I think a lot of politicians are starting to talk about the costliness and all of these horrible effects that the system is having that are starting to spill over into things that they actually care about, like money, right? But we're not asking them, is this really deep enough? Is this radical enough? We can't just say, oh, criminal justice reform, check. We have to say how and challenging them that way. And I would like to just shout out Bronx Connect for coming out. Eli asked a great question. And I know we don't have time, but I know there was another Bronx Connect young person back there who had a question. I don't know if we'll have time. I just wanted to say that I was proud of him. I saw you stand up.
No pressure.
I think you know who you are. I'm not going to put him on the spot.
Yeah, we don't do
All right,
coercion here.
That's
but
it. We're good.
All right. So
Yeah.
I just only thing I'd like to say, Brian, and I think that this is important, especially when we have a conversation about who has won and who hasn't.
Yeah.
And what I would say is that none of us have. When you think about what's going on and how long it has taken us to get to this place where we could even have this conversation, and the cycle has not been broken yet, what I would offer as a suggestion is that we all be aware that there are no winners here. And this whole situation really is just deplorable. And the only thing I think we can do at this point is look forward. You know, as far as looking backwards and saying, well, we've accomplished this and we've accomplished that. I mean, we're still trying to accomplish things that should have been accomplished eons ago. So when I look at that and I think about some of the things and, how long, you have generals saying this and these people acknowledging that and this person acknowledging that, and, we have this standard, right, that we're supposed to be following or trying to get to, and, here we are. So I think we're doing the best that we can do considering the circumstances. Are we?
Thanks so much. Alex,
I think the brother back there had a question.
Yeah. Marjolaine will come over. We've got 4 whole minutes left. So.
Hello, I'll be quick. I agree with what you said, Dominic. I don't necessarily think there's any clear-cut winners, but I was going to say Prometheus is winning, in my opinion. I feel like he admits that he broke the law. I can't remember. I don't feel that he admits that he did the wrong thing. I think he believes throughout that he did the right thing, and his story continues to make the case for why he did the right thing, why he was compassionate in his choice, and why the punishment, even though he broke the law, didn't live up to the fact that he still felt he did the right thing and the thing that was right, not just for him, but for more people. And I think it's in that space where he does not give up his testimony and his experience and his belief that he did the right thing, that conversations about what a punishment should be, or if other people can hear him, or if other people can see his humanity, like that sort of, if he gives that up immediately when the people come and say, well, just say this, just say that, this can all be over, if you just, in not giving it up, I think that's sort of what creates the space for that conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I have one last comment about who wins. And what you were just saying made me think about Khalif Browder, because if you, I don't know if you heard the story of Khalif Browder, but he was a 16-year-old kid who got arrested in the Bronx for being accused of stealing a backpack. And he had a $3,000 bail, I believe, and he couldn't post it. And he spent 3 years in Rikers Island fighting his case. And throughout those 3 years, he was offered numerous times the chance to plead guilty and go home, because they was going to say, time served. And he didn't. He kept on fighting until the DA said, well, we don't have a case and dismissed it. And he went home and eventually committed suicide because of the trauma that he experienced in Rikers Island. But had he pleaded guilty, he would have took that time. He would have listened to what the other people were saying. Take the time. And he would have got released. Mayor Bill de Blasio would have never closed Rikers Island because his cases would catalyze him to close Rikers. So he's a martyr. So, there are no clear winners here, but that decision, had a great impact on a lot of people. And even though Mayor de Blasio is kind of moving slowly to close Rikers Island, next month, the first building in Rikers Island is going to be closed.
Thank you so much. So, thank you all. This has been a really exciting and wonderful way to end our series here at WNYC. We'll do more, and we'll let everyone know about it.
Thank everybody for coming.
Yeah, I really appreciate everything you said. I just want to close by saying that, I think, whether what the gentleman in the back said is true or not, whether 2,000 years from now people are finding this play relevant, I think is wholly predicated upon what we do when we leave this space tonight. Interpersonally, and I think that the comments about children is really cuts home to me, but also as citizens and as active reformers for a system that we all know needs to be reformed. And so I challenge us all to take this conversation, the energy we've generated in this room, and to channel it toward constructive action into more conversations with people who weren't in this room. And this conversation will live for a while as a live stream on the site. So if you want to send it to people, if there are parts of it you want to share with people, I hope you will. And Theater of War Productions will be delivering another 20 or 25 performances out in the boroughs. We're also going to be doing a run of a play on law enforcement and the divide between law enforcement and communities called Antigone and Ferguson, which we premiered on the stage that Michael Brown graduated from in Ferguson, Missouri, starting September 8th at Harlem Stage. We're about to announce it. We hope you all these projects are free. They're not transactional. We want you to come because we want to have a gift exchange of conversation with you. And we want all of you to know about these productions because we want you to come to more and participate and be part of what we do. After an early performance of Theater of War, someone got up and answered the question I often ask, which is, why do you think the playwright wrote the play? And the individual stood up and said, I think the playwright wrote the play, this ancient play, to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. And by bringing such diverse audiences together, WQXR listeners with Bronx Connect, Fortune Society and Open Society with WNYC, our hope is to comfort and afflict in many directions, with the hope that it leads to connection and real action as we leave this space. The one action I want to ask you all to fulfill last is, as you're leaving, if you wouldn't mind, it's not a quid pro quo for the cookie, but if you could just simply fill out the survey that is in all of your programs. We take your feedback very seriously. But before you do that, I just want to thank our panelists and our actors with one last round of applause. Thank you so much.